Mark Alvarez worked the night shift at the tall glass office building on the corner of Blake Avenue. Most people who passed him each morning barely noticed him. They saw a man in a simple uniform, pushing a cart with cleaning supplies, carrying bags of trash, wiping down fingerprints on glass doors. To them, he was part of the background of their busy lives, quiet, gentle, and always polite. What they didn't see was the long day he lived before he even stepped into the building. Every afternoon, long before the office lights dimmed, Mark walked his daughter, Lily, home from school. She was 7, full of questions, full of energy, and full of dreams he wanted to protect with everything he had. Their small apartment wasn't fancy, but it was warm and safe. He made sure of that. After school, Lily liked to sit at the tiny kitchen table drawing pictures while Mark cooked simple meals. She talked about things she learned, books she liked, and stories she imagined. Mark listened to every word. He worked hard so she could feel heard and loved. Even on days when his body ached or his mind felt heavy, being a single parent wasn't something he had planned. Life had changed faster than he ever expected, and when it did, he didn't have the luxury of breaking down. Lily needed him, and that was enough to make him keep moving forward. He learned to stretch every dollar, repair things instead of replacing them, and find joy in the small corners of life. It wasn't easy, but he never let Lily see the worry he sometimes carried like a shadow. Most people at the office had no idea who he really was outside of the uniform. They knew he was friendly. They knew he worked hard, but they didn't know his routine, the balancing act he performed every day. When he arrived at work, the sun was usually setting. People rushed out of the building while he walked in, exchanging tired smiles or polite nods. The lobby always smelled faintly of coffee and the fading perfume of office workers heading home. Inside that lobby stood the grand piano. It wasn't there for music. It was there because someone years ago decided it made the building look elegant. Co-workers joked that no one had ever heard a single note come from it. It was polished often, but never played. For Mark, passing that piano was a quiet reminder of a part of his life he had carefully tucked away. He never touched it. He never even paused near it. He simply rolled his cart past it each night and pushed the memory of music deeper down. His shift began the same way every evening. He checked the supply closet, made sure everything he needed was stocked, and then walked floor by floor. He wiped down desks, vacuumed carpets, emptied trash bins, and cleaned windows. The building was quieter at night, and sometimes the silence felt comforting. Other times, it felt too heavy, like it carried every unsaid thing in his life. But he kept working. He always did. People who saw him assumed his life was simple. They didn't see the long bus rides, the late grocery runs, the stack of bills he sorted through every Sunday night. They didn't see him stay up an hour later to fix Lily's school project or wash her uniform for the next day. They didn't know he once dreamed of something different. There were moments, tiny ones, when the past tugged at him. Sometimes when he passed an open conference room and saw a piano screensaver glowing on someone's computer. Sometimes when he heard a melody playing softly from a phone left on a desk. And sometimes when Lily hummed a tune she didn't know he recognized. But he never brought those moments to the surface. He couldn't afford to live in a memory when the present demanded so much. His coworkers didn't know his story. They didn't know he used to stay up late at night, listening to recordings, studying techniques, practicing until his fingers were sore. They didn't know how deeply music was once woven into who he was. To them, he was just the quiet man who greeted everyone with a warm smile and cleaned the hallways with care and dedication. Sometimes, the younger employees tried to make small talk. They would ask him things like how long he'd been working there, or if he ever got bored cleaning the same offices every night. Mark answered politely, but never offered much detail. He preferred to keep his life private. In a place where everyone was rushing, He didn't want to be someone they pitied or someone they looked down on. It was easier to simply be the janitor who did his job well. Even though people hardly noticed him, he noticed everything. He saw the stress lines on workers' faces as they rushed for deadlines. He saw the forgotten lunch bags and motivational quotes taped to monitors, and the photos pinned to cubicle walls, families, pets, vacations, dreams. He cleaned around them carefully, like they were pieces of someone's heart. He respected that. He knew what it meant to hold on to something precious. Some nights, when the building was completely still, Mark allowed himself a moment of pause. He would stand in the empty lobby, shoulders slightly stiff from work, looking around at the clean floors and glass reflecting the dim lights. In those moments, he felt both invisible and essential. He took pride in doing things well, even if no one saw it. Work was work, and he had responsibilities. Lily's future depended on it. The elevator rides between floors were quiet moments too. He would stand there, hands resting on the handle of his cart, mind drifting to thoughts of Lily, sleeping peacefully at home under her favorite blanket. He often wished he could spend more evenings with her, read her more bedtime stories, or help her with homework instead of getting updates from the neighbor who watched her at night. But he reminded himself that he was doing all of this for her. Every late shift, every long night, every tired morning, it was all for her. There were a few colleagues who showed kindness. A receptionist who sometimes left him a cup of hot tea. A security guard who chatted with him during breaks. These small moments broke up the long nights and made the job feel less lonely. But even with kindness, no one knew him fully. They didn't know about the sacrifices or the dreams he once carried so tightly. He never told anyone that the building he worked in was filled with echoes of his past. Years ago, he might have stood in a room full of people, sitting at a piano, ready to play. But life had taken him in a different direction. Now he cleaned those rooms instead. He had made peace with that, or at least, he tried to. Some employees whispered that Mark seemed too thoughtful for the job he had, as if people with deep minds couldn't do physical work. But Mark never judged them for their assumptions. He understood that the world moved quickly, and people rarely looked deeper than the surface. They didn't see the man who woke up early to pack lunches, fix broken zippers, braid hair badly but with love, and make sure the person he cared for most in the world felt safe. Despite the struggles, there was warmth in his life. Lily's laughter filled their apartment like music he didn't dare play anymore. She asked him questions about everything: why stars twinkled, why clouds moved, why he sometimes looked tired. He always answered with patience. He didn't want her to feel the weight he carried. He wanted her to grow up feeling hopeful, not worried. They had routines that made their little world feel full. Friday nights meant homemade popcorn and movies they'd already watched a dozen times. Saturday mornings meant pancakes shaped unevenly because Mark was terrible at getting the circles right. Sunday afternoons meant laundry and cleaning their small home together. Simple things, but precious ones. And through all of it, he never once complained about his job. He was grateful to have it. Grateful it allowed him to take care of Lily. Grateful it kept their lives steady. The only thing he wished for, quietly and tucked deep in his heart, was that he could give her more someday. People might not have noticed Mark, but he noticed himself changing. Certain years had left marks on lines on his face, a soft tiredness in his eyes, a carefulness in how he spoke. He lived life slowly, intentionally, like someone who had learned the value of holding on to peace whenever he found it. Every night, around the same time, Mark passed the polished piano again. He didn't touch it, didn't let his eyes linger. But every night, without fail, he felt something inside him stir for a brief second, like an old memory calling from far away. He ignored it, pushed his cart forward, and reminded himself that life wasn't about what he once wanted. It was about what he needed to do now. He had no idea that everything was about to change. Not that night, and not because of anything he planned. Life had a strange way of unfolding in moments that appear ordinary on the surface. And for someone who spent most of his time unnoticed, it would soon be Mark standing in the center of a story he never expected, one that would begin quietly, with a simple question, in a building where he felt invisible. But for now, he was just the janitor doing his job, moving through the quiet halls, carrying the weight of a life no one fully understood, and walking past a piano that hadn't been played in years. The building was always half asleep when the evening shift began, but on this particular night, something felt slightly different. Mark sensed it the moment he stepped through the glass doors. There was more noise than usual, more laughter echoing across the lobby. A small group of employees had stayed late finishing a project, and the tired energy in the air made them a little louder, a little bolder, and a lot less aware of how their actions affected others. Mark had no intention of getting involved in whatever they were doing. He gave them a polite nod and rolled his cleaning cart past, heading toward the storage room to restock supplies like he always did at the start of his shift. The soft wheels of his cart squeaked slightly, a familiar sound he barely noticed anymore. As he moved across the lobby, he passed the grand piano again. He didn't look at it, didn't slow down. It was simply part of the scenery, a decoration he'd grown used to ignoring. But tonight, the employees lingering near it didn't ignore it at all, not one of them. A young man named Tyler, who often stayed late and liked joking around, tapped the piano's shiny surface. "Do you think this thing even works?" he asked his friends. Another person laughed. "I doubt it. I think it's just for show. Bet it hasn't been touched in years," a third one said. Mark kept moving, heading toward the elevator. He didn't want to draw attention to himself, especially when people were in loud, playful moods. He preferred quiet nights. They helped him stay focused, helped him get through the long hours. But before he could step into the elevator, one of the employees called out to him. "Hey, Mark," Tyler said, waving him over with a grin. Mark paused. He didn't like being the center of attention, especially around groups, but he didn't want to seem rude. He walked back toward them slowly. "What's up?" he asked softly. Tyler pointed at the piano. "You think this thing can actually play music?" Mark glanced at it briefly. "I'm not sure," he said. "I've never seen anyone try." That answer seemed to make Tyler's grin grow wider. "Well, you should try it." Mark froze for a moment. "Me? Yeah, why not?" Tyler said. "We're all curious if it works." One of the others laughed. "Come on, Mark, show us what you've got." They weren't being cruel. Not really. But there was something in their tone, a teasing edge, that made Mark feel small again, like he did back in school when kids joked about things they didn't understand. He knew they weren't expecting anything serious. They thought it would be funny. They thought he would sit down, press a few keys, and get a laugh out of it. He forced a small smile. "I'm not really a piano person." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "You sure? You look like you'd be good at something like this." It was meant as a light joke, but Mark felt the familiar flutter of nerves in his chest. He wanted to walk away, return to his cart, start his shift, and slip back into the comfortable invisibility he was used to. But the employees kept encouraging him, clapping, telling him to give it a try, insisting it would be fun. Someone pulled out their phone, ready to record whatever happened next. Mark didn't like that. He didn't like cameras or attention, or having eyes on him when he didn't choose it. But refusing too strongly would only make things worse. He knew how groups worked. Pushing back would make them tease more. So he took a slow breath, trying not to let the nerves show. "Just one key," Tyler said. "Just hit one. We're curious if the thing even makes noise." Mark walked toward the piano reluctantly, every step feeling heavier than the last. The surface of the piano reflected the lobby lights softly, almost glowing. He hadn't been this close to it in years. He felt something stir quietly inside him, but he ignored it. The employees backed up, forming a loose semicircle. All eyes on him. Mark sat down on the bench. It felt strange under him, familiar, in a way he had tried hard to forget. He placed his hands on his lap, trying to steady his breathing. The bench was slightly cold. The room suddenly felt too warm. He could walk away. He could laugh nervously and say he changed his mind. He could pretend he didn't care, but something had already pulled him in. He lifted one hand and placed his fingers on a single key, gently, softly. Pressed. A clean note rang out. The employees cheered not because of the sound, but because something finally happened. "See? It works," one said. "Your turn, Mark," another joked. "Play us something real." Mark swallowed. His thumb hovered slightly above a second key. He didn't mean to let his fingers rest there, but they did, like muscle memory he never asked for. Something about the soft shine of the keys made his heart beat differently. He pressed another note. Then another. No one laughed now. They were waiting, expecting the joke to continue. But for the first time in years, Mark didn't walk away. He sat up a little straighter. His fingers moved again, lightly touching the keys. He wasn't playing a song yet, just letting the memory of old moments guide his hands. One of the employees whispered, "Wait, is he actually good?" Mark heard the whisper, but he didn't react. Something deep inside him was waking up a part of him he had spent years trying to bury. A part that once dreamed, once practiced for hours, once lived for the sound of music, but he wasn't ready to show any of that. Not yet. He cleared his throat and stood up quickly. "I should get to work," he said. "Long night ahead." The group groaned. "Oh, come on." That was cool. "Play something real, just one song. Don't bail on us, Mark." Tyler laughed, nudging his friend. "He's probably hiding something. Maybe he's secretly a pro." Mark smiled politely, pushing the bench back under the piano. "I'm not a pro. I just pressed a few keys." But there was something in his tone, something soft, something almost shy, that made the group fall silent for a moment. People often sense things without understanding them. And right then, they sensed there was more to Mark than the uniform he wore. He grabbed his cart and began walking toward the hallway. The elevator chimed as the doors opened. He stepped inside, grateful for the escape. As the doors closed, he heard one of the employees say quietly, "I swear, he knows how to play." The elevator doors shut, cutting off the voices. Mark sighed. His heart was beating too fast, for reasons he didn't want to think about. He began his usual rounds, wiping down desks, emptying trash bins, and cleaning glass tops. But tonight, he felt distracted. His fingers tingled from the brief contact with the piano keys. His mind kept drifting back to the lobby, to the small group gathered around him, to the sound of the single note he played. It was just one note, one small sound, but it felt like a door he'd sealed shut had cracked open. He didn't want it open. He didn't want old dreams pulling at him again. Not when life was already heavy enough. He tried to shake it off, focusing on his work. He wiped down a long conference table, scrubbing until the wood felt smooth under his hands. He collected scattered papers and carefully placed them in piles. He straightened a row of chairs with practiced precision, but every small sound, the hum of the building's ventilation, the soft buzz of lights overhead, the distant echo of footsteps seemed to carry faint traces of music tonight. He didn't understand why pressing a few keys had affected him so much. He had walked past that piano thousands of times without looking at it. He had chosen to keep that part of himself buried because life had changed and left no room for the things he once Love. Now it felt like the memory of music was tapping. On the inside of his chest, halfway through the hallway, Mark paused and leaned against his cart for a moment. He rubbed his hands together slowly, as if trying to chase off the lingering feeling. It was nothing, he whispered to himself. Just a joke. That's all. But deep down, he knew it wasn't nothing. Something had shifted the moment he touched that piano. Later in the night, when the building grew quieter, Mark returned to the lobby to empty the final trash bin. The piano sat there in the dim light, untouched again, silent and perfect. He slowed down without meaning to. His cart glided across the floor until it came to a gentle stop near the lobby's center. He stared at the piano, not directly, but in the way someone looks at a memory, soft and cautious. He could walk away. He should walk away. He reached for the trash bin, emptied it into his bag, tied the bag tightly, and placed it on the cart. Professional, focused, routine. But before he turned away, his eyes lifted again. The piano seemed to glow under the dim lights. Even though it hadn't changed at all, he took a step forward, then another. He stopped only a few inches away. He didn't sit down, didn't touch the keys, didn't let himself get close enough to fall into old habits. He only whispered, so quietly that even he barely heard it, "It's been a long time." Then he turned away quickly, almost afraid of his own voice. He didn't see the security camera above the lobby entrance capturing his movements. He didn't know. Someone would review that footage later, and he didn't know that tonight was just the beginning of something much bigger, something that started as a joke but would soon grow into a story that changed everything. For now, he simply pushed his cart back into the hallway and returned to the quiet life he had built, unaware that the piano and the people around him were not done with him yet. The next night began like any other, but Mark felt something different in the air long before he reached the building. Maybe it was the quiet of the streets, or maybe it was the way his mind kept replaying the sound of those piano keys from the night before. He didn't want to think about it. He tried to focus on the usual things, dinner dishes he had washed before leaving, the gentle way Lily had hugged him goodnight, the small list of groceries he needed to pick up in a few days. Ordinary things, safe things, but no matter how he tried to distract himself, his thoughts kept drifting back to the lobby piano. Even as he pushed open the office building door, the memory of those notes rested heavily in his mind. He hoped no one was still talking about what happened. He hoped the small group of employees who had teased him had forgotten all about it. But the moment he stepped inside, he realized they hadn't forgotten at all. A few people who usually didn't stay late were gathered near the front desk, sipping coffee from paper cups. They looked tired, but awake in that restless after-hours way. One of them noticed him and nudged the person beside them. "There he is," someone whispered. Mark felt his stomach tighten. He walked past them slowly, his cart rolling beside him. He gave them a small smile, hoping to slip by without conversation. But Tyler was there again, leaning against the wall with a half-empty cup in his hand. "Hey, Mark," he called out. "Ready to play for real tonight?" A couple of the others laughed, not mean laughter, more curious than anything. But it still made Mark uncomfortable. "I have work to do," Mark said gently. "Lots of floors tonight." "Oh, come on," Tyler replied. "Just one real try. You tapped a few keys yesterday, and you acted like you were hiding something." Mark didn't respond. He simply pushed his cart toward the elevator, wishing the doors would open faster. But someone else added, "You looked like you knew what you were doing." Another voice said, "Yeah, how come you didn't tell us you could play?" Mark pressed the elevator button again. "It was nothing," he said. "Just a joke." The elevator dinged, finally opening. He stepped in, keeping his face calm, even though his heart felt heavy. As the doors closed, he heard someone say softly, "Trust me." He knows. The elevator doors shut, and Mark was wrapped in silence again. He tried to focus on work, but his hands moved slower than usual. His mind wandered. His body went through the motion spray cleaner on the glass. Wipe in steady circles, pick up small bits of paper on the floor, empty recycling bins that smelled faintly of coffee and ink. But his thoughts were somewhere else entirely. Every so often he caught himself humming a melody he hadn't thought about in years, then immediately stopped, almost startled by the sound of his own voice. He didn't want music to creep back into his life. Not when he had fought so hard to bury it. It reminded him of a past that no longer fit his world. A past filled with dreams he could no longer afford. He cleaned 3 full floors, trying not to think. But the piano kept appearing in his mind, its shiny surface, its soft glow under the lobby lights. The way those single notes felt under his fingertips dot by the time he reached the 4th floor. He felt restless. He paused near a large window overlooking the city. Lights sparkled across the distant buildings, small and far away. He pressed his palm lightly to the cold glass. "Stop thinking about it," he whispered to himself. But the more he tried to forget, the stronger the feeling grew. That small moment at the piano. It had felt alive, real, like something in him had been asleep for years and was struggling to wake. Up, he shook his head and returned to his cart. He had work to do, responsibilities, a life built on staying. Grounded. Music had no place in that life. Hours passed. The building grew quieter. Most employees had gone home. Even the security guards were settled into their routine checks. By the time Mark reached the last section of his shift, the halls were completely empty. His footsteps sounded louder in the stillness. The lights hummed faintly overhead. He cleaned the final conference room, arranging chairs neatly around the long table. He wiped each chair's back, each surface, moving carefully, almost gently. When he stepped into the hallway, he noticed something strange. The lobby lights were brighter than usual. He frowned. The night settings were usually dimmer this late. Maybe someone forgot to switch them. He pushed his cart toward the lobby slowly. When he turned the corner, he stopped in surprise. The piano wasn't alone. 2 security guards and a few night shift staff stood around it, talking quietly. They weren't joking or laughing like the group earlier. They were simply there, as if waiting for something. As soon as they saw Mark, they straightened up. "Evening, Mark," one of the guards said kindly. "Long night?" Another asked. Mark nodded slowly, unsure why everyone was still near the piano. "Just finishing up." The guard closest to him rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. We heard from some employees that you played a little yesterday." Mark tensed. "It was nothing. I just pressed a few keys." One of the night shift workers shook their head. "They said it didn't look like nothing." Mark felt his chest tighten again. "I really should finish my shift." He tried to walk past, but the group stepped aside rather than blocking him. No one pressured him, but no one left either. The atmosphere felt different from earlier, gentler, quieter, less like teasing and more like curiosity. One of the guards spoke softly. "You don't have to if you don't want to. But would you maybe try playing something? For yourself, not for us." Mark froze. For himself. He didn't know the last time someone had said something that simple to him. He stood there, staring at the polished surface of the piano. It reflected the bright lobby lights almost too clearly. Something inside him trembled, not fear, not exactly. More like a longing he wasn't ready to name. "I shouldn't," he said quietly. "It's late." "You're here every night," the guard replied gently. "A few minutes won't hurt." Mark looked down at his hands. His fingers were tired from hours of cleaning, slightly rough from daily work. They didn't look like the hands he once had hands trained for delicate movements, for creating sound and emotion. He didn't know if they could still play. He didn't know if he wanted to know. He stepped closer to the piano. The group went silent. Mark sat down slowly, as if the bench might disappear beneath him. His back straightened naturally. His shoulders softened. His breathing became steady. His fingers hovered over the keys. He didn't try to remember a full song. That felt too heavy, too big. Instead, he pressed a soft, simple note, then another. And then something changed. His fingers moved almost on their own. They found familiar patterns, shapes, paths he thought he had forgotten long ago. He didn't think. He didn't force anything. He just followed the faint memory of where his hands wanted to go. A melody began to form. Soft, gentle, fragile. Like the first few breaths of someone waking up, the sound drifted through the lobby, filling the quiet corners of the room. It spread like warm light, like something alive. The people watching didn't move. They didn't even breathe loudly. Their faces softened, surprised by the sudden beauty coming from someone they had only known as the quiet janitor, who cleaned their floors. Mark didn't notice their reactions. He wasn't aware of anything except the keys beneath his fingers and the slow rush of emotion rising inside him. The melody grew, deeper. Richer. It didn't sound like a performance. It sounded like a memory, a story he hadn't told in years. For a moment, he forgot the long days, the bills, the exhaustion, the quiet sadness he carried. He forgot the uniform he wore, the floors he cleaned, the years he locked away this part of himself. For a moment, he was simply a person playing music. His fingers danced lightly across the keys, touching each note with a tenderness that surprised him. The melody shifted from soft to fuller, then softened again, like waves gently pulling at the shore. He closed his eyes. He hadn't meant to, but the music pulled him in completely. Minute passed, then 2, maybe 3. Time moved differently around him. When he finally finished, the last note floated gently into silence. He opened his eyes slowly. The small group stood still. Their expressions changed. Something warm, something quiet, something respectful rested in their eyes. One of the guards blinked, looking almost emotional. That was beautiful. A night worker whispered, "I didn't know anyone could play like that." Mark swallowed hard. He wasn't used to compliments, especially about this part of himself. "I used to play," he said softly. "A long time ago." He didn't say more. The group didn't push him. They nodded gently, understanding that some stories weren't ready. Yet Mark pushed the bench back slowly and stood up. His hands were trembling. He didn't know if it was fear or relief. But he knew something important. The part of him he had tried to bury wasn't gone. It had only been waiting. He picked up his cart and prepared to finish the last few tasks of the night. As he walked away, he didn't notice the security camera blinking quietly above him. He didn't know that someone in the building, someone much higher up, would soon see that footage, and he didn't know his life was beginning to shift in ways he couldn't yet imagine. For now, he just walked down the hallway, heart full of a feeling he hadn't felt in years, hands still tingling with the memory of music that had never truly left him. Your 1,700-word Part 4 story will appear here. Late that night, the building felt different. The hallways were quiet, but not the kind of quiet that made a person feel alone. It was the kind of quiet where every sound echoed just a little longer, as if the walls were listening. And in that stillness, something gentle began to drift through the air. A soft melody. It wasn't loud. It wasn't bold. It slid through the hallways like warm light slipping under a door. The notes rose and fell like calm breathing, steady and full of feeling. Anyone who had walked into the building at that moment would have stopped right where they were. The music had that kind of pull, the kind that made your heart slow down and your chest feel warm. The sound came from the lobby, where the old grand piano sat. The piano looked like it belonged in a fancy concert hall, not in the corner of a corporate building. Most people walked past it without even glancing at it. Some joked about it. A few had pressed a key or two while waiting for the elevator. But no one ever really played it, except now. The man sitting at the piano, the quiet janitor who hardly spoke unless someone spoke to him first, looked nothing like the music he created. His clothes were plain. His hands were rough from years of cleaning and scrubbing and fixing. But the moment his fingers touched the keys, every part of him changed. His shoulders relaxed. His face softened. His eyes almost closed. It was like he wasn't in the lobby anymore. He wasn't in a building where people left coffee spills for him to clean or tossed paper on the floor. He was somewhere else entirely, somewhere he hadn't been in years. The employees who had asked him to play, thinking it would be a funny distraction, were now silent. They stood frozen a few feet away, staring at him as if they had discovered a secret hidden in plain sight. None of them spoke. They didn't laugh. One forgot she was even holding her phone. Another felt a strange tug at his chest, the same tug a person feels when they watch a sunset or hear a story that reminds them of who they used to be. The music kept pouring out, soft at first, then bigger, fuller, like a wave swelling before it breaks. The janitor's fingers moved across the keys with ease, almost like they remembered something his mind had tried to forget. He wasn't showing off. He wasn't performing for applause or attention. He was simply playing because the music inside him needed to come out. While he played, sound rolled through the lobby and slipped into the hallway. It reached the elevator. Then it drifted up the stairwell. It moved through vents and around corners. It climbed to the second floor, the third, and eventually reached the top. That was where the CEO stood. She had returned for a late meeting that she wasn't excited about. The day had been long. Her head felt heavy. Her shoulders ached. She only wanted to grab a folder she had forgotten and leave as quickly as possible. But when she took a few steps toward her office, something made her pause. She heard the music dot. At first she thought someone had turned on a speaker by accident. But the notes didn't sound digital or recorded. They were alive, warm, full of mistakes too small for anyone but a pianist to notice. Human mistakes. The kind that made music feel real. She stopped walking. Her eyebrows pulled together as she listened. The melody was familiar, heartbreakingly familiar. Not because it was a popular song or something she had heard in a movie, but because it was something personal. Very personal. Her father had loved that piece. She had grown up hearing him play it on quiet evenings when the house was peaceful. She would sit on the floor near the piano, drawing or reading while he played. She could still remember the way he moved his head while he played certain parts, or how he always slowed down the last line, even though the sheet music didn't ask for it. And now here it was again, a memory brought to life through the hands of someone she had barely noticed before. She followed the sound without thinking. Her feet carried her to the stairs, down one flight, and then another. Each step she took made the music clearer, richer. By the time she reached the lobby, her chest felt tight. She didn't know what she expected to see, but she certainly didn't expect him. The janitor. The man she had passed countless times while walking through the building. The man she nodded at politely, but never truly looked at. The man she knew nothing about. He played with such emotion that it was almost difficult to watch. His hands moved quickly, not rushed, but controlled, knowing. His shoulders swayed gently, not for show, but because the music guided him. No one noticed the CEO at first. She stood at the edge of the room, frozen, her breath caught in her throat. One of the employees turned, saw her, and straightened his posture awkwardly, as if he had been caught doing something wrong. But she didn't react to them at all. Her eyes stayed on the man at the piano. She listened closely to the melody, to the quiet tremble in certain notes, to the way he slowed down exactly the way her father did, the same soft pause before the final part, the same gentle rise that made the piece feel like a deep breath. Lump formed in her throat. She hadn't heard the piece played like this in years. Not since her father's passing. She hadn't expected to hear it ever again, at least not in a way that felt this real, this alive dot without meaning to. She wiped the corner of her eye. The music wasn't sad, but something about it broke open a place in her that she had been keeping shut for a long time. The employees standing around her shifted uncomfortably. They didn't know what to do. They had no idea the CEO was having such a personal moment. They didn't understand why she looked like someone who had just been hit by a memory. But she didn't care how she looked. She only cared about the music. The janitor reached the last part of the piece. His fingers slowed, the notes growing softer, gentler, like a quiet goodbye. The final sound lingered in the air, longer than it should have, floating like a held breath. Then he lifted his hands from the keys. Silence filled the room that no one spoke. No one clapped. They just stood there, caught between awe and confusion. The janitor didn't turn around at first. He stayed still for a moment, as if letting the last note settle inside him. When he finally looked up, he froze. He saw the CEO. Her face wasn't stern or cold the way some people assumed. Her eyes were soft, emotional. It was clear that the music had reached her in a way none of them expected. She stepped forward slowly, almost cautiously, like she didn't want to break the moment. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked softly. Her voice was gentle, not demanding, not authoritative, just human. The janitor swallowed. He looked down for a moment, unsure if he should answer. But something in her expression made him feel safe. "I used to play a long time ago," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was a heaviness to it, a weight. Anyone listening could hear that the story behind his words wasn't simple. The CEO nodded slowly. Her eyes didn't leave his. "That piece," she whispered. "My father used to play it. I haven't heard it like that in years." The janitor looked surprised, not because she had a personal connection to the song, but because he hadn't expected his music to mean something to anyone in the room. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't know." She shook her head. "Don't apologize," she said, her voice shaking just a little. "Thank you." The employees around them were silent. A few looked down, ashamed of how the whole thing had started, as a joke. They hadn't expected this outcome. They hadn't expected to witness something that felt so real, so honest. The janitor stood slowly from the piano bench. He didn't look proud or embarrassed. He looked thoughtful, almost vulnerable. The CEO studied him carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. There was a long pause. Then she said quietly, "Would you mind telling me more about your music?" "Only if you want to." The janitor hesitated. His fingers brushed the edge of the piano bench, almost like he needed to hold on to something. He seemed unsure, but not unwilling. "I can," he said finally. "But it's a long story," she smiled gently. "I have time." And for the first time that night, the lobby no longer felt like a workplace dot. It felt like the beginning of something important. Your 1,700-word Part 5 story will appear here. The lobby stayed quiet after the last note faded, as if even the air wanted to respect the moment. No one rushed to speak. No one tried to fill the silence. It was the kind of silence that came only after something meaningful had happened. The janitor stood beside the piano, unsure of what to do with his hands. The CEO stood in front of him, her expression calm but full of emotion. the kind that wasn't easy to hide. The employees nearby looked uncomfortable, not because the moment was bad, but because they suddenly felt like they had seen something they were never meant to. The CEO took a slow breath before she spoke again. "You said you used to play," she said softly. "Before all of this." He nodded. His eyes drifted toward the piano. "A long time ago. Would you tell me about it?" She asked. Her tone wasn't pushy. It wasn't the voice she normally used in meetings. It was warm, curious, almost gentle, like she was talking to a friend instead of an employee. He hesitated, not because he didn't want to talk, but because the story wasn't simple. It was heavy, full of years he didn't usually share with anyone. People didn't ask about his past, and he didn't offer it. But tonight felt different. He slowly sat down on the piano bench. The CEO stayed standing for a moment, then moved closer and pulled up a chair. The employees stepped back, unsure if they should leave or stay. But she gestured gently for privacy. "You can go for now," she told them kindly. They nodded and quietly slipped away, still in shock. Now it was just the two of them in the wide lobby, the soft hum of the building filling the background. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had just played something that moved a room to silence. "I used to be on a different path," he began. His voice was low, steady, but there was a small tremble in it. "Music wasn't just a hobby. It was my whole world." The CEO listened closely, leaning in slightly. "I started playing when I was a kid. My parents didn't have much, but they found an old keyboard at a yard sale, and I fell in love with it. I played every day after school. Played until my fingers hurt. Played until the neighbors complained." He smiled a little at the memory. "People told me I had talent, a natural gift. For a while, I believed them. I started playing in small recitals, then bigger ones. I got into a music program, then another. I spent hours practicing every day. It felt like everything in my life made sense when I sat at a piano." The CEO nodded slowly. "You were meant to play," she said. He looked at her. "I thought so too." Then the smile faded. "But life doesn't always follow the plan you think it will." He paused, and his eyes softened, filled with memories both beautiful and painful. "I met someone," he said quietly. "Someone kind, patient, someone who believed in me more than I believed in myself. She supported my music even when money was tight. She worked extra jobs while I practiced for auditions. She came to every performance she could." The CEO listened without interrupting. "We had a little girl. And for a while, everything felt perfect." His voice cracked just a little, barely noticeable, but real. "Then she got sick." The CEO's expression softened instantly, but he quickly added, "Nothing that breaks YouTube rules," with a small, shaky smile. "Just something that changed everything." He took a long breath. "I stopped performing. I stopped practicing. I took whatever jobs I could find so I could be home more. I didn't want to be away. Music felt like something from another life. Something selfish, even." He rubbed the back of his neck. "After she passed, I didn't touch a piano for years. Not because I didn't want to, but because every note reminded me of her." The CEO's eyes softened with empathy. She didn't try to say, "I understand," because she knew everyone's loss was different. Instead, she waited. "I had my daughter to raise," he went on. "She needed stability. So I worked wherever I could. I cleaned offices, fixed lights, did anything to keep us afloat. Music didn't fit that world anymore. It didn't pay the bills. And now?" she asked quietly. He looked at the piano. "Now I play sometimes late at night when my daughter is sleeping, but only at home. Never in front of anyone. Tonight was the first time I touched a piano in public since." since before everything changed. The CEO leaned back slightly, exhaling. "You're remarkable," she said softly. "Your music." It brought back something I hadn't felt in a long time. He blinked, surprised. "That piece you played," she continued, her voice trembling just a little. "My father used to play it when I was young. He played it almost exactly the way you did. I've never heard anyone else play it with the same feeling." She looked down at her hands. "He's gone now. I didn't expect to hear that sound again. Tonight," her breath hitched softly. "Tonight felt like having one more moment with him." He lowered his eyes. "I'm glad it meant something," he said quietly. "It meant everything," she replied. There was a long silence. Not awkward, not heavy. Just understanding. After a moment, she asked, "Do you want to play again?" He shook his head gently. "Not right now." He paused. "It's a lot." She nodded. "Of course." He stood up from the bench and stepped away from the piano, as if giving himself distance from a memory that had woken up too. Quickly. The CEO stood too. "Thank you for trusting me with your story," she said. He gave a small nod. "You're welcome." But she wasn't finished. "Want to ask you something," she said carefully, as if choosing her words. He looked at her, curious. "Would you ever consider doing more with your music again?" He froze a little. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I have responsibilities. I have my daughter. I have this job. Music feels like something from another lifetime." She nodded. "I understand," she said. "But it doesn't have to stay in the past." He didn't respond. "Not yet." Her tone softened even more. "You have a gift. A rare one. And you've carried it alone for too long." He swallowed. "Maybe," he whispered. Then she added, "And maybe it's time someone helped carry it with you." He looked at her with uncertainty in his eyes. The thought of returning to music felt impossible, frightening, hopeful. All at once. "Think about it," she said gently. He nodded. And for the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him, something he had pushed down, buried, forgotten. Hope. The night had started with a joke. It had turned into a performance. But now it was something bigger. A beginning. Something was changing. Quietly but unmistakably. Not just in the building. But inside him. Inside her. And later. When he walked home under the streetlights, the cool breeze brushing against his face, he felt a small shift in his chest. A soft thought. What if? The weight of the day didn't disappear. His struggles didn't magically vanish. But the idea that life could be different, even in some small way, felt possible. Lights glowed in apartment windows around him. Cars passed slowly. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Everything looked the same as it always did, but he felt different, and he knew, deep down, that the moment in the lobby hadn't been the end of something. It was the start, the first step toward a part of himself he never thought he'd see again. He unlocked his apartment door quietly so he wouldn't wake his daughter. He glanced into her room, saw her sleeping peacefully, her small hand resting on her blanket. He smiled softly. He wanted a better life for her, and maybe, just maybe, music could help him get there. He didn't know how. He didn't know when. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't close the door on the idea. He left it open, a little crack, enough for the future to breathe. Your 1,700-word Part 6 story will appear here. The sun was still rising when he stepped out of his apartment the next morning. The sky was painted with soft pink and pale gold, the kind of quiet colors that never made a big show, but still made a person stop and breathe for a moment. He stood there for a few seconds, letting the cool air settle around him. The night before still replayed in his mind like a warm echo. The piano, the music, the CEO's words. The feeling he had walked home with, something he hadn't felt in years. Maybe things could change. He didn't know how. He didn't know when. But the thought stayed. He walked to work with a slower pace than usual, not because he was tired, but because his thoughts were heavy in a different way. Not heavy with stress, heavy with possibility. When he reached the building, he expected the morning to be normal. The usual routine. Cleaning floors, emptying bins, fixing light bulbs. But as soon as he stepped inside, he noticed something different. People were looking at him, not in a strange way, not in a mocking way, just noticing him. A few gave small smiles. One person nodded politely. Another whispered something to a coworker, both of them glancing at him with wide, curious eyes. He felt his face warm a little. He wasn't used to attention. For years, he'd blended into the background, not because he lacked value, but because no one ever tried to look deeper. Now they were, and it made him feel exposed, but not in a bad way. Before he could fully process it, the elevator opened, and the CEO stepped out. She looked more rested than she did the night before, her eyes bright and focused. But when she saw him, her expression softened instantly. "Good morning," she said. He swallowed, a little nervous. "Good morning. Do you have a moment?" She asked. His heart skipped. "Yes." She gestured toward one of the small meeting rooms off the lobby. "Let's talk." He followed her quietly, unsure what this conversation would be. Part of him worried he had somehow caused trouble. Another part knew that wasn't likely, not with the way she had listened to him last night. When the door closed behind them, she sat down and motioned for him to do the same. "I've been thinking about what you shared," she began. "About your music, about your life, about everything you've been carrying on your own." He nodded slowly. "I don't want to overstep or make assumptions," she continued, "but I want to help. If you'll let me." He looked at her carefully. "Help how?" She folded her hands gently. "First, I want to offer your daughter a full scholarship through our company's education program. It will cover school supplies, after-school classes, tutoring, anything she needs." His breath caught. "Second," she said, "I want to offer you a new position here. Still steady work, still reliable hours, but not janitorial. Something where your skills are valued differently." He blinked, stunned. "What kind of position?" "Community arts liaison," she said. "We partner with local schools, youth centers, and community groups. We fund programs for kids who can't afford lessons. We run workshops and small events. I want you to be part of that, to help guide the music side of things." He stared at her, unsure he heard correctly. "You want me to teach, if you'd like to, or coordinate, or mentor, or simply play? The title can adjust to your comfort." He shook his head slightly. "I've never taught anyone before." "You've taught yourself," she said softly. "That's often the hardest kind." His chest tightened, emotion rising. "And finally," she added, "I want to give you another opportunity. One you don't have to accept. But I think it could be meaningful." He waited. "We're hosting a charity event next month. Hundreds of guests. A fundraiser to support youth programs. I'd like you to perform as the closing act." His heart dropped right into his stomach. I don't know if I can do that," he whispered. "I'm not asking for a decision today," she said kindly. "Just think about it." He leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed. Everything felt unreal, too generous, too big, too sudden. "I don't want to take something I don't deserve," he said quietly. Her expression softened. "You deserve every bit of this. Not because of last night, but because of who you are. Because of what you've survived. Because of the gift you've protected even when life tried to take it from you." He looked down, blinking rapidly. "This could change things for you," she added. "For your daughter. For your future." He took a shaky breath. "This is a lot." "I know," she replied gently. "Take your time." They sat in silence for a moment before she stood. "We'll talk again when you're ready." He nodded, still stunned. After she left, he stayed seated for a while, letting everything settle inside him. His mind raced. His heart pounded. But somewhere beneath all the fear and disbelief was something warm about hope again. Later that day, during his break, he stepped outside and called his daughter's school. He asked if he could pick her up early. When she came running out with her backpack bouncing behind her, he knelt down and hugged her tight. "Guess what?" he said softly. "What?" She grinned. "We might have some big changes coming." She tilted her head. "Good changes?" He smiled. "I think so." They walked home together, her small hand wrapped around his. She skipped over cracks in the sidewalk while he drifted between fear and excitement. He didn't tell her everything yet. He didn't want to confuse her. But that night, after she fell asleep, he sat alone at the small keyboard he kept in the corner of the living room. He placed his fingers on the keys. Then he played. Not the same piece from the lobby. Something gentler. Simpler. Something that belonged to the present. Not the past dot as he played. He realized something. He didn't feel the old heaviness. He didn't feel fear. He didn't feel like he was breaking a rule by letting himself enjoy it. He felt free. The next morning, he returned to the office. His mind was clearer. His heart lighter. He found the CEO in her office. "I've been thinking about everything," he said. Dot. She looked up. "And I want the new job," he said quietly. "And the scholarship." "Thank you." She smiled warmly. "Of course. As for the performance," he swallowed. "I'm scared. Really scared. But I think I want to try." Her eyes brightened. "You won't be alone. We'll support you." He nodded. "Thank you." The next few weeks felt unreal. He met with program coordinators. He visited community centers. He sat with kids who had never touched a piano before. Some were shy. Some were loud. Some were curious. But all of them looked at him with eyes full of possibility. Dot. And when the charity event arrived, the hall was filled with hundreds of people. Lights glowed across the room. Families gathered around tables. Kids he had worked with sat in the front rows, waving at him excitedly. Dot. He stood backstage, hands shaking. The CEO approached him. "You ready?" "No," he whispered. Then after a breath, "But I'll go anyway." She smiled. "That's all courage is." He walked onto the stage. Dot. The applause surprised him, soft but welcoming. He sat at the piano, a perfect, polished instrument that reflected the stage. Lights. He took a slow breath, then another, and then he played. The room went silent. His music filled the hall, warm and full and honest. It wasn't perfect. His hands trembled once or twice. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the emotion, the life he poured into each note. People listened with full hearts. Some wiped tears. Some closed their eyes. His daughter watched from the front row, her face glowing with pride. When he finished, the applause rose like a wave. Dot loud, dot long. Dot. He stood slowly, overwhelmed. The CEO nodded at him from the side of the stage, her eyes full of quiet pride. For the first time in years, he felt whole. He stepped off the stage and hugged his daughter tightly when she ran to him. "You were amazing," she said with a huge smile. He laughed softly, holding her close. And in that moment, he knew he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. And this new beginning, this new purpose was the start of a life he never thought he could have again.